Well, Steph, good evening and happy Sabbath. It's good to see
Happy
you
Sabbath. Yes,
at the
sir.
table.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Ooh.
indeed.
I feel
Ladies and
like I
gentlemen,
was here just a couple weeks ago. It feels so recent.
I was getting ready to say we don't always get to see Stephanie at the table here at PRT, but we are always excited and delighted when we get to see you here. And I am just honored and privileged to have you with me tonight. For those of you that are joining us tonight on this, 14th day of March, I bring you greetings from our other regular co-host, Dr. Dion Henry, Pastor Roger Wade. Neither of them could be with us tonight, but I know that you are on their minds and they are missing you and looking forward to being back with us. But I get the privilege, the singular privilege of being able to sit here with Steph tonight. Steph, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I took the last 2 days off. Look, the last 2 weeks. Can I talk about the last two
Okay,
weekends?
let's talk about the ooh.
Let me jump in real quick.
Yeah, all
The
right.
last couple weekends we've been talking about burnout. Well,
Yeah,
no, we talked about culture. We talked about the burnout 2 weeks, 3 weeks
right.
ago.
That's
Two
right.
shows. So this week I took off Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay.
Self care.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Miss HR.
feels good. It's good.
Yes. All right. Took off Wednesday and Thursday. Well, listen.
Mm,
If you are just joining us tonight, we want you to know that we are talking about managing risk. Steph, there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on in the world, in the nation,
yes.
um, with weather. There's stuff that's going on in just society in general. There's stuff going on in politics. It's probably making people feel a little more antsy than we may have normally felt. And so I think it's a great thing to have you with us tonight because in your conference, is that part of your role as HR to handle risk?
Yes, some of it. We have a risk manager, but I'm responsible for managing all of the background checks of all of our volunteers, not just in the office, but across all of the churches, all of our employees. So yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, there are going to be people who are watching tonight that deal with youth ministry. They may be a Sabbath school teacher, they may be a Pathfinder director, they may be a youth pastor or even a pastor. There may be a choir director. In my experience, a lot of our risk comes from dealing with children and things like that. But we're going to delve into all of that and find out more about that this evening with our very special guest. Steph, tell us who that is this evening.
Well, before I tell you who it is, we need to do something. We need to
Okay,
tell our
preach,
viewers
Dr.
do a
Henry. I
couple
mean, I
things.
mean, Steph, go ahead. You got it.
Okay, we need you to share. If you're
Come
watching
on
on
now.
YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, we need you to tag somebody, share it. If you're watching it in the restream or the replay, we want you to share it there because this information that we're going to be sharing is extremely important. And I know a couple of the topics that we will be discussing tonight are questions that I get at the local level. And
Hmm.
so this information is going to be, I think, relevant to not just pastors, but to individuals across our denomination, whether that's the school area, the
Hmm.
church area, or even the local office. So, yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And listen, while you are sharing and letting people know and getting them to hop on this stream, even we've probably got teachers like in our educational. So if you're an educator, I think that you're going to benefit from this conversation tonight. But listen, not only do we want you to share, we want to know that you're there. I see we've got some folk in there tonight. If you just type, let us know where you are watching from, your hometown or your home church. Just shout that out. We want to welcome you to tonight's edition of the Pastors Roundtable. All right, so we've got that out of the way. But wait, I'm not going to move any further, Steph. We're not going to bring on the guests until I see somebody type a hello. I need a happy Sabbath, Steph. A happy Sabbath, Pastor Paul. I need a something in the chat. I'm going to see how long we got to stay here before I get one person, just one, just one. Here's the appeal. Give me one. Give me
Is
one.
there
Can I
one?
just have one? Is there one? Wait,
Is
let me
there
let me
one?
get some appeal music. Where's the appeal song? Here we go. All right. Um, if you're sitting out there tonight and you feel the move of the keyboard on your spirit. We just want you to type a hello. Just a good evening, a happy
Oh, we
Sabbath,
got
or
one. There we go.
we got one.
I,
Hey, hey, all right,
yes.
all right, all right.
Yes, we
And
do.
that is
All
our
right.
dear friend Carlene Sinclair. Happy Sabbath
Good to
from
see
Claremont,
you. Good to
Florida.
see you.
All right, good stuff. Good to see you, Carlene. All right, Steph, talk to us. Who do we have tonight? And let's introduce him.
I am so, so, so excited. He probably does not know that I am probably one of his biggest fans. And if they actually had commercials that ran, I would probably need to be in the commercial. But at the table today, this evening, this Sabbath, we have Elder James Winegardner, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Adventist Risk Management. And from the first time I heard him speak, I was just a fan.
Ah, wow. Let's bring him on. There he is, ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth,
And
and
that
the
is
legend.
true. It is
Thank
true.
you,
Yes.
Steph. I appreciate that.
All right. Listen, to our audience tonight, James is no stranger to the PRT. He is a PRT alumnus, and we are excited and again delighted to have you back with us, Elder Weingartner. Thank you so much for consenting to come and hang out with us again here at the PRT. We appreciate what you do, but we're going to give you just a minute to just give our audience just a little hello, or anybody else that you want to shout out, and just to tell us a little bit more about what you do, where you are, where you're doing it. So we're going to give you. I'm not going to give him a time limit, Steph. I know we normally
Yeah.
give folk a time limit, but I'm just going to let him roll. So, Elder, the time is yours, sir.
Thanks. I'm James Winegardner from San Antonio, Texas, and my career has kind of gone back and forth between being a pastor and being a lawyer. And during the time that I was a pastor, I served in Texas conference, and then I also had an opportunity to practice law, always in Texas. But there were some times that I also worked for the church during that time, and I was the claims director for Adventist Risk Management back in the early 2000s. And then many years later, I was pastoring down in the Keene Church in Keene, Texas, um, when the Adventist Risk Management needed a new CEO. So they asked me to come and participate. And so here we are, and we're the official risk management organization for the Seventh Day Adventist Church. We have a peer organization down in the South Pacific Division, and we have an office in South America, in Brasilia, and we have an office in London area. And and we are busy doing the one thing that we do, and that is everything we do is to protect, preserve, and restore your ministry assets.
Hmm.
And that's all we do. And our ministry is not to baptize people, although we have baptized people, but it's not our
Come on
ministry.
now.
Our ministry is to protect your ministry. And that's what we're here for. And we want to help you to navigate the risk inherent in doing ministry.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I know that there might be somebody. Oh, yeah, there might be somebody tonight who says, "But are you hiring? Are there any openings?" Got offices all over the world, and to be able to participate, and there are people who have that penchant and that propensity. They want to help protect and preserve, and so again, we thank you so much for what you do. Before we hop into our conversation tonight, we typically will begin with a word of prayer. So, Steph, I'm going to ask if you would just offer us a word of prayer as we get started tonight.
Sure. Let's bow. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the opportunity to have this discussion tonight. I pray and ask that the information that is shared will go far and wide, Lord, and that the words that are spoken will make a difference in ministry across North American Division, and for those who may also be watching from other places in the world. We thank you for Elder Weingarten's willingness to be here this evening, and we just pray and ask that you would be in this conversation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, we're going to hop in, Elder, to our questions for tonight. I've tried to do a little something different with our screens tonight. Let's see if we can make this work. Our first question tonight is up on the screen. Can you share with us all the services of Adventist Risk Management, or that Adventist Risk Management provides to conferences in the North American Division?
Good. Well, let me narrow it down to the North American division first. We insure the world and the North American division.
Got
The
it.
We are always um, optional. We are always elective. If somebody doesn't want to insure with us, they don't have to insure with us. So it's by choice only, and we have about 90 some percent saturation in North America. The rest of the world, it's this and that because of the different insurance laws and our ability to protect them. But we have 85% of our business is focused in North America because of two main issues. One is the property values in North America are really high compared to the whole rest of the world, and number two is that the jury system in North America is dangerous and hostile. And so the 85% of our premium is in North America. So what we do to the for the conference is number one, we offer them a commercial package policy that includes commercial property. That's property for all their commercial needs, except for things that are really, really high dollar. So anything over 35 or so $1 million, the Loma Linda Church, the General Conference Building, the North American Division Building, that sort of thing, we place with larger insurers. But anything less than that, we typically cover for the conferences. So that's commercial property. And I think the most important thing to mention about commercial property is that churches and conferences are commercial property managers. They ought to recognize themselves as such. Sometimes, my granddad built this church, and we've been attending this church all these years, and they don't think in terms of being commercial property managers. And so a commercial property manager has a lot of responsibilities and duties like inspecting their building, making sure it's all safe, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what on the commercial side, commercial property side we have. The other is commercial general liability. The insurance industry calls that CGL. And CGL includes all kinds of liabilities that we create for other people when they attend our church or when they are on our functions or when we're out there doing ministry and affecting people. So trips and slips and injuries that happen, that sort of thing. And then we have two other big components of that commercial policy. One of them is our employment practices and sexual misconduct liability, and that's the one that makes bad headlines. But it's really important that we protect our HR people who are dealing with staff who sometimes gets unhappy with us. And when they do, that's what we're here for the insurance of that. We also, of course, insure the liability for people making sexual misconduct claims. We can probably talk about some of that later if you want. We have some other policies that we provide the commercial auto. Almost all of our conferences, through their churches, schools, and other institutions, own vehicles. And so we insure their automobiles. We place the commercial cyber liability, and we place the executive risk, which is boards of directors and that sort of thing. And then the last one that isn't one that we talk about very much, but it's the one that affects most lay people the most is um, short-term travel and other travel insurance for missionaries and people who do short-term mission trips and that sort of thing. This year, the General Conference session is coming up this summer, and so we'll insure probably just about every person who comes. We were very happy in the big camporee we had last summer up in Wyoming, is it? I think um,
Gillette.
Gillette. I believe we insured well over half of the young people and their sponsors who showed up at Gillette. So we offer that kind of short-term travel experience as well.
Can I
Well,
jump in here before you ask a question, answer? Can I just ask a real quick clarifying question because I heard this and I just want to know, and I may be opening a can of worms, so forgive me. But at one point, we were told, and when I say we, I mean local churches, conferences were told very adamantly that they could not have 15 passenger vans. Is that still the case? Because I heard that that was no longer the case. So just again, opening a quick can of worms,
Sure.
15 passenger vans, yes or no?
Oh boy.
Really easy question, a really easy answer. Those For those of you who remember, we became kind of a everybody laughed at us because we talked about that so very frequently. They took a 10 passenger van, 8 passenger van, and they extended it behind the rear axle to accommodate another row of seats so they could appeal to a larger market. And it made the vehicle completely and disastrously unsafe. The balance of the vehicle was thrown all off. And they continued to sell them for years, even though they knew, we knew, and everybody knew that they were an unsafe vehicle. The good news is that with electronic stability control and other improvements, everything after 2013 has returned to a baseline. And so it's really important to know that if you're going to buy a van, anything after 2013 is corrected for that. Before 2013, those vehicles are still on the market. If it's more than 10 passengers, don't buy it. Please don't buy it. They're unsafe. And anything with a dually rear end is safe, is okay. But if it doesn't have a dually, a simple two-wheel rear axle that holds more than 10 passengers is something to avoid and be careful about prior to 2013. After 2013, they're corrected for that.
That was good information.
Wow, that's very good information. I had no clue because we've been hearing that well after 2013. So that's very fascinating. Good to know.
It's taken a lot of
I
research to get to that answer, but we finally paid for some engineers to do that research and give us the confidence that we can say that with safety. Now, what's really interesting is that we became a kind of a mocking boy about that subject. Everybody kind of laughed at us for talking about it so much. I hope that we saved lives with that. But there are other things that we really want to consider when we think about travel and driving. And those really are: is the vehicle safe and maintained? Do the brakes work? Is everything registered? Is everything inspected? Is everything right? And then who's driving it? Are you going to put 8 or 10 or 13 uh, children in a van with a 17-year-old driver? How about an 85-year-old driver? These are questions that you need to ask yourself. Are you going to put a child on the back of a motorcycle, etc.? So these are questions we ask, and they're questions that I think every responsible ministry leader needs to ask. Who am I going to let my children ride with?
good, good. One more clarifying question. You said earlier you used a phrase. You said something about 90% is, and if I understood it correctly, you were saying 90% of the North American division is covered under Adventist risk management.
That's correct.
Okay, then what's going on with the other 10%? Who are they using? How does that work?
Our biggest competitors are Church Mutual and Guide One. Those are the two other large insurers that have marketed aggressively to the Seventh-day Adventist population. And so I don't know if it's appropriate to name the conferences, but there are several conferences who go with them. And sometimes they offer them kind of good deals that are incentivize them to go with them. This last year and a half or so, 2 years, we have recouped Central States and um, Allegheny East. So those two conferences have come back to us in the last 2 years.
Okay, all right. All right, good stuff. I'm seeing some questions in the chat.
I
Gonna
saw
go.
one about cyber liability. Did you see that one?
Yes, 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 yes. Where'd
Can
that
you
one
read it to me?
go?
Because it's not on my screen right now.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yes and no. We place our cyber insurance. Um, what people don't know about commercial cyber insurance is that cyber insurance is two things. One is paying the loss. But the other, and maybe even more important part of cyber liability insurance is the services that are provided when you have an event. So when uh, denial of service happens, you need forensic inspectors, you need people to step in and help you with the whole thing. And most of us are not qualified, not competent in that area. And frequently, the IT director at your place is the one that just got hacked. And
Mm,
so they're going to need somebody to come alongside at that point and help. And so that those services are provided by the insurer. And so those services are equally important with the actual indemnity protection. And so we don't have those services right at hand. That's not our wheelhouse. So we write this insurance primarily with Beasley, but also with another carrier, and we encourage everybody to get that. It has become more and more challenging to get because you have to have systems in place that are reliable and safe, or they won't insure you. And so that's the big issue that we're working with now is making sure that all of our entities are competent. And the North American division has really stepped in to help on this. There are a number, we have individual entities like academies
mhm,
and other ministries, smaller ministries that are in our North American family. And if you have an academy that has 10 or 15 employees, there's no way that you are competent in IT. Even if you have the smartest guy in the world there that's great with IT, usually it's handed over to one of the teachers who has an affinity for that. And you're not really competent in the environment. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about anybody. I'm just saying you can't compete in that. There are literally millions of hackers around the world trying to penetrate your system every day. And so having the systems on board is hard. So the North American division is making a place, and most of the unions are also working with them so that incompetent or small, not credible organizations can join in to a larger pool with all the right structures to protect these entities from cyber liability.
wow, that's
And
very good.
I, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steph. You got it.
No, I was just gonna. I just wanted us before I got to my next question because I know the time is gonna go, and so I'm just like excited. But this one question stood out to me only because, see, I'm a risk nerd. What can I say? I'm a risk management nerd.
Mm.
Um, there was a question about background checks and volunteers. Before we get into the next thing, I just wanted to make sure we hit that one as well.
And so
I can
actually,
answer it, but I'm gonna let you.
Steph might be the better person to answer the question, but the North American division provides for a framework for those and a policy for those. But those are executed at the conference level, and the conference gets the response. Tell us what you do with them when you get them, Steph.
So when I do background checks, once I get them, I first of all, I think our conference has tired of me emphasizing that everybody, and I mean everybody, if you work in the if you're the usher in the church, you're going to get background checked. If you're running AV, you're going to be background checked. If you're anybody in the church, you're going to be background checked the South Central Conference. And so once those are cleared or not cleared, we notify the church. But churches, we don't hire, we don't volunteer, nobody. And I shouldn't say I know that 100%, but I have said it a million times, because one of the probably the largest uh, risk comes from people. I mean, there's weather risks and so forth, but to me, the riskiest folks in the world are the people. So we always try and make sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. So in answer to that question, do VBS volunteers need to be background? If nobody else is background checked, anybody working with the child must be background checked. Full stop.
All right, so that raises, and I know we're a little off script here, but that raises a question that ever since this has come up in regions where I've pastored, there has been a huge, I don't even want to say hesitancy. They're just like, psh,
Resistance.
I ain't doing it. Um, like, and part of the reason is what is even more heightened today are issues over legal residency. And so I pastor in South Florida. You've got people whose status, immigration status, may be in question or not. And so you've got people saying, yeah, I want to serve my church. I want to be an usher. I want to be a Sabbath school teacher or whatever. But I'm afraid that if I do this background check, that something may, and especially now, is somebody going to come? Is ICE going to come knocking on my door, et cetera, et cetera? How do we respond to those kinds of concerns now?
I'll just tell you, we've never had that happen. We do understand the
We've never
concern.
been in 2025 before either, huh?
I understand. Listen, we did have, interestingly, a couple of years ago, we had, I don't know, y'all know the term outcry?
No,
Yes.
I don't.
When a child has been abused and a child reports that to a person, which is just anybody they tell it to, the very first time that they report that is called the outcry. It's
Mhm.
just a social work term that they use for that. And once that outcry occurs, the person to whom they told this information becomes a really important witness that's going to be involved in the trial and all the rest. They also are, in most cases, if they're serving at the church, they're what's called a mandatory reporter. And so if a child makes an outcry to a person at the church person has a statute that says that they're going to be criminally liable if they don't immediately report that to the authorities. And this is a nexus where undocumented persons in the United States, if a child tells them and they have to report it, they have, I think, a pretty legitimate fear. And yet they have to stand up and do the right thing for the child in that setting. And so we have had a challenge with that one, but we've never had a challenge with the background check. Go ahead, Steph. Sorry.
I was going to also add, and that we're going to stay on topic tonight, but I will say, with regard, because Pastor Paul raised it, one of the things that may actually help a person who may have questions about their immigrant status, it may help them because they may be able to apply for a T or U visa under criminal activity. So there's actually a special visa for people who actually witness crimes that helps them to stay in the United States. So it actually
It,
Mm,
may be a better thing. And I'm not going to get into the immigration piece of it,
right.
but
Me
sure.
too.
Well,
Real
there's
quick,
we had that. Oh,
Sydney's answer is at the conference level is where the cyber liability is written at the conference level, and the conference covers the churches under them.
good. There's one more issue that kind of is the same vein, but on the flip side of that, that I've also heard churches raise concerns about if we do this background check, um, and it's from somebody, it's on a person who has lived a majority or a significant part of their life in another country, does that background check reveal if there are concerns that have happened somewhere else, or only, and what do they do?
No, they don't. And to be fair, the background check is necessary because it is the lowest basic thing that you can do to protect children. Full stop. That doesn't mean that it's the most effective thing available out there. Honestly, it's a pretty low hurdle. We don't have very many people, and Steph can tell you this. We don't have very many people who are sex offenders volunteering at our churches. They know, and they're not going to volunteer. They know what they are, and they're not going to volunteer because they know there's a background check. And the corollary to that is that almost every time, and Pastor Ansley, you mentioned the people who really resist. Most of the time, I've found that people who really resist have something in their history they don't want discovered. But Steph will tell you that that's really not that big a deal because if somebody had a DWI 5 years ago, that doesn't preclude them necessarily from volunteering. might want to not drive, for us, but that's what the conferences filters these things for, and the local church never needs to even hear about that. That's all filtered by staff up there at the conference, and it's a separate deal. So we are being careful with that, and if the people understood that, I found almost always when they're resistant, it's because there's something back there that they're wanting to hire, and so it's a problem.
Good. All
And I
right.
could tell stories, but I'll not take a lot of time.
All right. Okay. I'm back on script. I'm not taking us anywhere. So you're up, Steph.
Well, I think, I don't know if you're going to put the question up, but this question, our next question has to do with disasters. So we know that we had the fires in Los Angeles recently. There were fires in Hawaii. We had the storm that hit Western North Carolina, Florida's hurricane.
We
And
heard
quite
from
frankly, right now I'm in Alabama and we are on a level 4 out
Mm.
of 5 storm watch that is coming across the United States. And so they literally have canceled church here in the Huntsville area at all of our churches tomorrow because they're anticipating huge storms.
Wow.
And so, in light of that, how do those events impact local churches? Are there direct impacts? Obviously for the churches that get destroyed, potentially in these events, I'm assuming if they're insured by Adventist Risk that there's some process. But does that then impact other churches? Do the premiums go, like, what happens there?
right. So on the last part of your question is the easy part. When an event happens and your church receives damage, you report a claim to us. You can find that all online how to do that. And once you report the claim to us, we send a field adjuster out there that we've hired, and they take care of looking at all that, evaluating all that, and then our claims examiners, Adventist people in our office, take care of the payments and working that out with the insurance. So that's the easy part of the question. And I'll tell you, I think we lost significant damage to a Los Angeles church, and lost a couple of homes out there that we insure in Los Angeles. But we were very, very, very blessed not to have lost a lot more. Um, the other part of the question, it would probably help to understand how we insure. So we're not a giant insurer. The largest insurer in the world is AIG, and Chubb is next, and they got these are gigantic insurers with billions and maybe even trillions of dollars worth of coverage. We're not like that, so we can't cover the whole stack of, of, of these expensive losses. So what we typically do is we cover the first $1 million. So we do that so that we can handle the claim, and we can be responsible for the first dollar of every insurance. Now that's less your deductible, of course, but we cover that for all of our policies. Then we write reinsurance and excess insurance on top of that in layers, and we write those with larger insurance companies than ourselves. So if you think of it, the nomenclature we use is we write the first million, we call that primary, and then we might write one that's called one excess of one, or 1x1, and that brings us to 2. Then we might write 3 excess of 2, and that brings us to 5. Then we
Mhm.
might write 5 excess of 5, that brings us to 10. And then we might write 15 excess of 10 to bring us
Hold on.
to 25. Now
Hold
that
on.
gets a lot cheaper as we go up, okay? Because most claims don't reach those higher levels. Every claim reaches your deductible, and most claims reach our primary layer, but those other higher layers are rarely touched. And so those coverages are far, far cheaper than the first million. And so that's the way we're able to cover these losses. Now, there's another side to that issue. And the other side to that issue, and this is a really important one, is that those markets understand the trends, and they're projecting trends. These are people like Berkshire Hathaway and Lloyd's of London. Okay, so these are sophisticated insurers, and they're forecasting risk well into the future. And for those of you who have paid your premiums in the last 5 years, you've seen that property and commercial property especially has just skyrocketed. It's gone completely out of reason. And the reason is wildfires in California and hurricanes in Florida and Texas and the Gulf Coast. And so those are exactly why those rates have been going up. We see those rates moderating right now, but we have lagged behind at Adventist Risk to try to buffer those steep increases for our church. And so we're going to continue to get right with the rest, but we're paying lots of premiums to these other companies, as well as keeping some in order to pay your claims. So the answer is it definitely affects a conference's premium cost over time if there are a lot of losses. If there are a whole lot of losses, then ultimately it raises everybody's rates a little bit, but much less because we cover so many properties. Did I
So
answer your
that's
question?
why it does. So that's why individually, if people look at their just, and I'm not talking about the church, but just insurance in general. So when people see their insurance rates for their cars like going up, it's because they're projecting that a billion cars are going to get ruined in a hurricane or a fire or whatever. So they're just padding their books to make those claim payments in the
So that
future.
they don't lose money because insurance companies hate to lose money. Interestingly, there's an old saying, I forget who it's attributed to, but it says that what happens to one person is entirely unpredictable, but what happens to all people is entirely predictable. And
Hmm.
so when you have enough people out there, they call it the law of large numbers, you can predict because we know how many cars will likely be destroyed this year. We know how many houses will burn this year. We know how many churches will burn this year. And so we plan for that. But when there's a dramatic increase in wildfires in California, Oregon, and Washington, that really becomes a new feature that everybody has to start pricing for.
Hmm.
Nobody expected a wildfire in Maui. Nobody expected North Carolina last week. So these are ones that are kind of outliers. Canada last year, if you'll recall. So there have been some wildfires in some very unusual places, uh, but the market has been adapting to try to get priced up for California, and this has helped them with some of these other more unexpected places.
Well, good. Oh boy, Elder, I just thought of another question that
Go for it.
so I gotta tell our audience this, share this. We were talking just before the show, and I came up with a question that I wanted to ask, and I'll come to that one. But another one just popped up in terms of how this affects our conferences, and not just these storms and natural stuff. But Elder Weingardner said to me, "Can I tell him what you said?" He said, "I'm not the." He said, "I'm not the White House press secretary. You can throw any question at me that you come up with." All right, so I'm going with that. I've been seeing across my social media over the last few days a couple of letters that have been written to the General Conference in regard to the reaffirmation statement on vaccines. So you're familiar, I'm if you're familiar with that whole the vaccine thing. And I
I'm
couldn't help but wonder. And so there are local churches, some of them they're written from the church, but they're citing the conference, et cetera, and their union. And they seem to be wanting the general conference to offer an apology or statement because they believe that there are people that have been harmed by these vaccines, that they could have avoided that harm should the church have written exemption letters. What's the level of risk to the church in things like that, situations like that? Not in
insurance.
situations like that, in this situation
Yeah.
specifically.
So insurance policies are written very narrowly, and there are two kinds of policies. This is way more detailed than you probably would know, but there are two kind of policies. There's a specific risk type policy that's written that says we're covering you for fire, full stop.
Hmm.
Okay, and then there's the more common kind of policy say we cover you for all possible perils. except, and then you start listing nuclear war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You start listing all the ones you don't cover. But in the end, it all comes to the same thing. We insure for the risks that we can anticipate and we have some clue about. And these policies are not something we invent out of whole cloth. These are policies that have decades and centuries of history behind them. And so a thing like being sued because you failed to have the correct policy on vaccines usually not going to be a covered sort of experience, okay? Because there's no insurance that's written specifically for that thing. There is executive risk, and it might have some coverage for that, but we'd have to have an actual case to test it. But the real issue on that one is foundationally, the argument that these people are making is that it really was an issue of spiritual faith whether or not to mandate or require the vaccine or not. And insurance policies, as well as governmental ordinances, laws, and regulations, are all specifically designed to avoid that subject entirely. Because that is not a subject that can insure against, and it's not a subject that the government should be legislating. And so the church did not take the position that most of these people are trying to say the church took. What the church didn't do, that they're really upset about, is that the church didn't declare this a spiritual question, a spiritual matter, and therefore jump out in front and say, therefore we're gonna fight this battle because it's a spiritual battle. The church, as I read their statements, didn't see it as a spiritual battle, and it saw it as just one more complication. Now, if it was a bad vaccine, it was a bad vaccine, but the fact is that not bad vaccines and even some questionable vaccines have saved literally millions of lives. I never worried about getting polio.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When people just 10 years my senior had polio. I have
Right.
cousins that have had polio. And polio vaccines actually, the early ones caused one recipient in a million to contract polio and die. And the people in our country decided that they were going to, as part of the social contract, risk their children to be that one in a million and maybe lose that child in order to protect millions of children who otherwise would have gotten the disease. And so that is a social contract. It is not really a spiritual question. And now people have turned that into a big issue, and now we have measles outbreaks. You know,
Mm-hmm.
polio had been eradicated in the entire world except for a couple of small pockets in the Middle East, where the Muslims had been told by their imams that it was a spiritual issue. Believe it or not, that this was the Western individuals, infidels, trying to sterilize your sons and daughters so they couldn't have children. And so polio continued to thrive in those few little areas, those little pockets over there. And now people have stopped getting vaccines, and these diseases aren't coming back.
Oh, all right. Well,
And
thank
I'm
you
not going to
for
argue it was a great vaccine, by the way. I don't know it was a good vaccine.
sure.
I'm not a doctor, but I am going to argue that vaccines have been something that have been safe, effective, appropriate, and part of the social compact, and never have been a religious issue until now.
Understood. Understood. All right. All right. Steph, anything else on that question, or are we ready to move to the next one?
Let's move on to the next one. I kind of want to skip the next one and go to like but you got it.
Oh,
Put it up
okay.
there. Yeah,
All
you're
right.
good. You're good.
It's up there. All right, here we go. What are the top three risks? One, two, three. Top three risks that impact the local church and our local conferences. And we know that you can't escape risk, but what suggestions would you give to local churches on mitigating those risks? I know that second part is a very broad part. You either want to take a stab at that in the broad sense or narrow it to the top three. You're welcome to do with it as you choose.
So there are two ways that we categorize risks, and one is by frequency, the other is by severity. Okay,
Mhm.
frequency and severity, really important issues. So the frequency of child molestation is very low, but the severity is very high. The frequency of church pipes bursting in the freeze is the high frequency. It happens a lot, uh, but the severity is often quite sustainable, right? So those are the ways we look at that. If we look at more severe types of claims, one that people don't often think about that is a very high occurrence of both frequency and severity for us, way too high, is people getting hurt at church work bees.
Oh, wow.
People doing things around the church that they get hurt doing. So we think in terms of ladders, we think in terms of electricity, we think in terms of tree trimming. And what do these things have in common? What they have in common is that these are things that in your regular life you would hire a professional to do. Why would you hire a professional to do it? Because most of us are amateurs in those and we don't have the skills to be competent to do those things. And so arborists are expensive. They're expensive for a reason because what they do is severely dangerous. When you cut down a tree, it's the same as catapulting an SUV across your yard. Now, most of us don't do that because it would you would want to call the MythBusters to do it because they do it carefully and with engineers on hand. We don't want churches cutting trees and branches. There is almost never a professional arborist in your church, and if they are, you should hire them to do it. You should not have them do it on the sly. Okay, electrician climbing up through roofs and ceilings, uh, climbing on ladders. We have paid literally millions of dollars because of these kinds of things that people do that really should be done by professionals. Is it okay to do plantings? Is it okay to do special extra deep cleanings of the church and things like that? Of course, these are things we're all competent to do, right? But the things that a professional should do, we should have a professional do because our amateurs are going to hurt or kill themselves, and we don't want to have that to happen. So that's number one.
Okay.
Um, Second one is honestly, auto is a bigger issue than you might think. Who do we put our people in? We already talked about this, so I won't go into it in much detail. Who do we put our people in cars with? You know, there's we decide we're going to go to the Sandy Patty concert on Saturday night. Is Sandy Patty still around? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to go to the Oakwood Choir
Maverick
concert.
City. Maverick
Okay,
City.
all right, good. Maverick City. We're going to go to that concert on Saturday night. Um, do we take a church bus? Do we say everybody find your own ride? Or do we say you three go with Sister Jones and you three go with Brother Frederick? Well, there are liability implications for all those, aren't there? And so we got to look at that, and we got to decide how are we going to do this. Everybody, find your own ride, enjoy your time. Here's some tickets. That we usually aren't going to have any liability on. But you three go with Sister Jones. We've just entered the liability zone because we've just provided somebody a ride from a volunteer. Is Sister Jones a good driver? You know, both drivers and potlucks make pastors very anxious because many of us have visited homes from which we would not eat food.
Play that organ. Hit the organ.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that organ.
And
I'm eating the food.
many of us have ridden with church members that we will not ride with again.
Mm, mercy.
And so we need to be very careful about who we put our people with. So that's number two. Number three is who do we allow to have contact with children? And you know, there's this nightmare scenario that we think of, which includes grooming, molestation, the whole thing, and we have those cases. But there's also child on child abuse. A big percentage of the issues that we have are children on children. The ninth grader and the sixth grader. and that sort of thing. Um, Also, there are adult on adult issues, and for years we have not taken those as seriously as we ought to. The Me Too movement has caused us, I think, a necessary and long overdue wake up.
Mhm.
And so those kinds of issues are ones. And my message, by the way, and I can be criticized for this, and I'm okay. You can criticize me, but here is my message on uh, sexual misconduct. Men need to take a step back. Men lack the antenna that women have for creepy dudes.
Hmm.
And if the women in your church start saying that guy's kind of creepy, you need to raise your level of supervision. You don't need to accuse anybody of anything. Don't need to exclude anybody or start whooping out a chaperone agreement. But you just need to increase your level of supervision, because when there's two or three women in your church who say that guy's creepy, there's probably a reason. They have antenna that you don't have, and you need to take a step back and trust them in what they say. Women live a much more dangerous life than men.
Mhm.
They
Wow.
are exposed to dangers that we don't imagine. When I want to go to the airport, I like to use the airport, Ronald Reagan Airport, that has had all the problems lately. I like to use that airport, and the way I use that airport is I go to this metro station, and I get on the metro, and I put on my earphones, and I enjoy the ride, and I go to the airport.
Mhm.
Every woman you know has to think many times before she's willing to do that, to get on the metro
Hmm.
alone.
Wow.
Day, and especially at night, you didn't ever have to worry about it. I didn't ever have to worry about it. But I want to tell you, Steph has to worry about it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we need to step back and trust the women in our church.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
I would add to that also trust the children, because children's antenna is very, if you see a child that says, "Ooh, he's creepy," or even, "Ooh, she's creepy,"
Hmm.
start to listen to the child. I know back in the day when I was young, it was sort of seen as disrespect for children not to hug the elder or the deacon or the deaconess. Um, uh, and so now I think we're a little more conscious about, believing kids, like not forcing kids to be in particularly physical contact with adults. Like there's no need to force that. I've heard many horror stories on the internet, on Facebook, in various groups where people have shared where they were sexually molested by individuals who were leaders in the church. They didn't say anything, and often encouraged to continue to maintain these sort of relationships because children back in the day were not given voice to speak up for themselves. So I would just add, be very, for our local churches, be very sensitive, which is why I'm extremely, you know, I'm very serious about churches doing background checks, conferences doing background checks for workers. So, but yeah.
So quick follow up on that. So let's review that. Number one was top one was um, work days.
Yeah.
All right. Number two was
Yeah.
automobile issues and transportation issues. And number three was, and I wasn't clear if that was strictly children or
So
adults and children. It's
protecting the vulnerable against sexual misconduct.
sexual misconduct. All right. Protecting the vulnerable
Yeah.
against sexual misconduct. Good. Steph?
And yeah, I was going to just ask a quick question. I saw this question, and it's not mine, and it's not in the chat, but I saw it in on Facebook one day in an Adventist group, and somebody asked the question um, about transporting children from school, or can schools give waivers, or can parents give waivers, or something along those lines. So in other words, if I'm a parent, can I say I want my child to ride with this person, or can the school give a waiver that your children are riding with whoever, and you're signing this waiver that releases us from any responsibility whatsoever.
So the Seventh Day Adventist Church is very good at schools. Okay, it, just like I said about stuff that we should hire professionals to do because professionals know how to do it, and we are amateurs at it. The Seventh Day Adventist Church has a very professional school system. We hire professionals, we vet the professionals, we train the professionals, and almost all of our teachers have master's degrees. I mean, they understand what's going on here, and we train them. We train them carefully. We train them regularly, and they have the answers to all those questions for parents. Those are the best practices, and we exercise them in the Seventh Day Adventist school system. And so they have the right forms for that. They have the right, and how do you navigate that? You navigate that with your individual school. And if there's somebody you don't want your child to ever ride with, you can say that. But usually, your waiver tells you exactly what's going to happen. And I'll tell you another thing, another byproduct of whining about 15 passenger vans for all those years is that many of our schools and especially universities have gone to larger multi-person vehicles that require a CDL. And for everybody, commercial driver's license. And we believe in CDLs. That it tells you that they're a grade above, right? I don't have a CDL. I'm a pretty good driver. I've been driving for too many years, but I don't have a CDL. But I would love to know that our students are riding with somebody who does have a CDL. And so when I was at Keene, I was very proud of my pastors who actually went the extra mile and went and got CDLs so they could be involved with the young people in
Yeah.
schools and drive the bus for them.
James, I don't know if it's my age that I'm just old or it's my neighborhood, but yeah, that
Mhm.
stuff you said about the people you go and hire, that was not my neighborhood. That was not my church. That wasn't my neighborhood. That wasn't my family. If there was a tree down, somebody went and got a hacksaw, a saw, and we did it down. And no matter what it was, there was always somebody. We didn't go and do those hiring of professionals to do it. If you needed a tooth pulled, you didn't have to be a dentist. You just grabbed somebody who had a needle and a thread and a door, and all those kinds of things. And so some of us grew up in scenarios and situations where that was not the norm to call a professional. If you needed some plumbing job done, dad got under there with a flashlight and tried to figure it out. If you needed something done with the car, we didn't take it to the shop. Dad got under there with a flashlight and tried to figure it out. Get in your
You didn't
mouth in
tell
there
your
with a
dad to buzz
flashlight
the
and try to figure it out. those are those are so I think that we are dealing sometimes with some cultural issues that it is not necessarily first. It's not the first thought is to we're trying to save the money because or just because we don't have the money, or there is that person who just feels like whatever needs to be done, they can get under
I
there
can
with a
do it.
flashlight and figure it out.
That's right. And so the if I listed for you the millions of dollars that we have paid, there was the one where the two gentlemen went to cut the tree, and the one gentleman cut the tree and it fell on the other gentleman, and he was became essentially a vegetable and had to have a life plan. There was the one where they cut the tree branch, it was a dead tree branch. They cut the tree branch, and it didn't quite fall. It kind of hung up in the other branches. So the next weekend, when they're having an outdoor potluck, it falls on the ladies, right? Well, those kinds of things are things that amateurs do. And honestly, ladders are tricky business. I heard from an emergency department physician, a Seventh Day Adventist, who said that people over the age of 50 should be banned from using ladders
Wow.
because he saw so many injuries. And we're not talking
Yes,
about
Steph.
churches now, we're talking about people. When you get to 50, and I'll tell you, about my 50th birthday, I fell off of a ladder. And when I was younger and I fell down, I used to hop right back up again.
Yeah.
When you're over 50 and you fall hard on the ground, I laid there for quite a while to see if I was alive still. And when I realized it was alive, I started checking my body parts. See, they all attached and not broken. And I was
That's real.
very blessed to walk away from that. But I'm
That's
telling
real.
you, when you're 50 and you fall 4 or 5 feet down on the ground, it's a different experience than when you're young. And so I have a very good friend that came through a drop ceiling. He stepped on the wrong part of the sheetrock and came through and landed in the floor of the kitchen in the church and broke his back. And no claim was filed, you know. But the fact is that this is stuff that we need to leave to the professionals.
Good.
Would you add? You didn't say it, and I want to jump to this next question because I think it's a good question. I don't want us to get too far, but one of the things that I would also you kind of mentioned it, but church maintenance, and I'm not talking about the repairs. I'm talking about trip and falls over carpet. I'm talking
Mhm.
about trip and falls over door thresholds that aren't secured down. Do you find a lot of claims for those kinds of things as well?
Yeah, there are trips and falls. I'll tell you. I saw somebody in the chat there that was tuning in from New York. New York is a dangerous place. You know, in New York, you're kind of strictly liable for anything that happens on the sidewalk right in front of your building, even though you don't own the sidewalk. So you have a thank you, Carly. Um, these are really dangerous experiences. There are a whole checklist on our website for you to look at. So let me share that. You need to look at that. You can download it. You can do it online. You can take it on your little iPad and do the checklist as you walk through your facility and check it for all these kinds of things. Extension cords. Did you know that extension cords are really designed and by code only supposed to be used for temporary?
Hmm. Well, by design, you
And
said.
I'm telling you, temporary isn't a year, okay? So that's for a temporary event, and then you're not supposed to use those anymore, right? But we see them all over our churches in a permanent setting, and had a really good experience in a church up in Connecticut. Safety Sabbath, we went to Safety Sabbath, and they had the fire marshal come over, and he had trained the kids, and it was a fabulous Sabbath afternoon. Really, a wonderful event, and so those kinds of events are really important. But let me tell you my quick story, and I hope I didn't tell you this story last time we were here, but I had a beautiful church member. He was a lovely old man, and he was a wealthy fellow. And I told him, I said, we got some church issues here that we need to look at in terms of maintenance. And he says, this church isn't old enough to need any maintenance issues. And I said, walk with me,
Wow.
brother. And so we started walking through, and I said, you see that water damage over there, and you see the grape juice stain over here, and you see these corners where they're peeled off over here, and you see that extension cord over here, and we got to the third room of like 25 rooms in the church, and he said, Pastor, we've got a lot of work to do. And I said,
Mhm.
yes, we do. And that man and I went through and we fixed all those things. We got all those things repaired. And when we were done, he wanted to celebrate, so he bought the church a steeple. The church had never had a steeple. And so
Wow.
he had the professionals come in with a crane and put a fiberglass steeple on top of that church. And to this day, it is maintained and has a steeple.
Wow. 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 Elder, we're on your on the website, and I was thinking that there's a that checklist that you mentioned. It should be on here somewhere, right? Where people could go
Yeah, you'll find it. Uh huh.
yeah.
I don't know exactly where it is, but safety resources is where you're in the right place.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Safety Sabbath
Safety
Risk Training
Sabbath.
Center, School Safety Podcast, Solutions Newsletter, and webinars and videos.
Things under
It's on there
there's sub
somewhere. I don't know exactly where it
yeah
is. Look under
there's
influence.
sub there yeah there's sub tabs under the tabs when you open it, but for
Okay.
sake of time,
Yeah.
because I know we're a little bit past 8, this is the website for those who are seeing this to the side, and this is where there are a ton of resources. They have information about 15 passenger vans and etc. And so there are QR codes if you want to take a picture of those QR codes, and then the newsletter where you see, for those who are watching, where you see English, Spanish, and French. The newsletter, that's the newsletter. So if you want to get information,
And that
additional
newsletter
information for your local church, it would be there.
that newsletter comes out every 2 weeks, and everybody is welcome to subscribe because it's an e-newsletter. It doesn't cost us anything extra to give it to you. So if you want to get it in your email box, you don't have to read it every 2 weeks, but you might want to read it. It's got some articles. Even I sometimes write articles for that. I'm not a very good writer, but I do write for it. And so there's lots and lots of resources in there that'll be prompted to you.
Good, 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 good. All right. All right. Listen,
You
I
want to
got to
take a
just a
break? You
pause
want to take
real.
a break before we go to the next
Yeah,
question?
okay. Let's take that little break, and we'll come back. Come right back. Gardner, Winegardner, stay right where you are. We're going to be right back. If you are just joining us tonight, we thank you for hopping in with Steph and I tonight at Pastors Roundtable. We've been having a wonderful discussion with Elder James Winegardner. He is the president and CEO of Adventist Risk Management, Inc. And we hope that you've been learning a lot. If you're just joining us or if you're watching this on the replay, well, if you're watching us on the replay, you've gotten this far, so you've already caught the beginning. But if you're watching us live and didn't catch the beginning, we want to make sure that you know you can go and catch all of the Pastors Roundtable episodes at Steph.
The PRT.com.
Live. PRT.live.
That live.
Live. PRT.live. You can go and check out all of our past editions of the Pastors Roundtable. Listen, Steph, I had to throw this up here. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Where did it go? You got to see this. Look at this guy. Look at this guy over here. Hello, PRT from San Jose, Costa Rica.
He's
Roger
getting
Wade.
eaten by mosquitoes. We're claiming mosquito bites.
We're
mosquito
praying
bites.
down mosquito bites on it. We're not going to do that, Raj. We miss you, man. We hope that you're having a productive work trip. Wink, wink.
Yes.
There at Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica.
He is. He's on a mission trip. He is on a mission trip.
Okay, he's on a mission trip. Good stuff. We look forward to having you back with us. Dr. Henry, wherever you are and the work has you, we are thinking of you as well tonight. Real quick, we talked about the PRT.live. Steph, what else can people find at the PRT.live?
So if we always solicit prayers, I'm often in the background praying for my brothers here as they host the program. But we also solicit financial support if you're in the position to do so. And we know things are tight, and so as the Lord puts it on your heart to contribute to this ongoing ministry, we ask that you would share financially. But always, please keep this program and our hosts and the background folks in prayer. We always want to be saturated with that.
Absolutely. We're in season 10, y'all. Season 10 of the PRT. This is the 5th year, but the 10th season. And God has blessed us to be able to keep this going, mostly out of our pockets. There are some of you who have taken the time and just been impressed to share some of your resources to help us keep this going. And we say a very big thank you to you. And for those of you, again, that want to keep helping us help you to keep ministry relevant, resourced, and real, we want you to take advantage of going to the PRT website, prt.live, and finding ways, multiple ways to be able to help resource this event, this ministry, this podcast to keep it going. I don't want to stay too far away from our guest.
Okay.
But we wanted to give that little break and hop right in. Oh, there's Roger. Where is he saying? Oh, look at him. Where the spirit of volunteerism is in our church. How would you help? Oh, okay. I thought he was talking about where he was in Costa Rica. He's doing the spirit of volunteerism. Okay, we'll get to that when we bring our guest back. All right. Again, tonight our guest is Pastor Elder
James Winegardner.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the button to click the screen to get him back. There it is.
There we go.
James Winegardner. We've had a wonderful conversation so far. We've learned quite a bit tonight.
Yes.
Couple of questions. I'm seeing, where did I see? I see self-serving question from Baldwin English, saying our churches in Miami, Florida. I know that insurance rates are high down here due to fraud Is South Florida a hotbed for insurance claims? And what are the leading areas? I'm assuming he's saying what are the leading areas that those claims fall in South Florida? Any idea off the top of your head, Eller?
We have very few fraudulent claims that we're aware of. So fraud is not a big issue for us. The real issue in Florida is, of course, weather. And the Florida conference, uh, you understand the overlapping jurisdictions, but the Florida
Hmm.
conference has gotten very proactive in making sure they have a fund for the deductibles and raising the deductibles in order to. So I have good things to say about them because they really are working for that. Because the in hurricane prone areas, the cost of insurance can become uh, ridiculous. Now I have something to say about that too. Property insurance is a bother. Wish it wasn't. It's just very expensive. Um, Many churches tell us we simply cannot afford that insurance, and I just got to say something. And I don't know, Pastor, if you experienced this, but there are a number of churches in North America who have kind of passed their high water mark, if you know what I'm saying,
Mm, yeah.
and they are inhabiting campuses that they can no longer afford. Now, I have a rule of thumb. That rule of thumb is if you can't afford to put a roof on your church, you probably can't afford that campus. And so it may be time, it is
Mm,
past time for some congregation to have that hard discussion. We're in a market right now where churches are being abandoned all over our country because those denominations are shrinking. And so there are churches of every size and description available at reasonable rate. So if you're in a
hmm
church campus that you can't afford, your congregation may need to have a hard emotional conversation to say goodbye to that campus and get into a campus you can afford.
Hmm.
If you've got 75 people sitting in a 450 seat auditorium, it's demoralizing to the people who are sitting there. And unless you have a specific plan to refill that in the next 3 years, get you a 100 seat auditorium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elder, that brings up another point that I think is worth repeating from the last time that I think it was you that was with us. You brought up the risk that are associated, that one of the biggest risk is empty buildings, and
During the
you
week.
defined that for us. I think that bears repeating. Would you share what you shared with us the last time with you on the risk of empty buildings and what defines an empty building?
So there's some strict legal definitions for an abandoned building. Now, abandoned buildings are almost impossible to insure because everybody who wants to take advantage would love to have an abandoned building to take advantage of, to either vandalize, to steal from, to live in, to burn down, to do whatever they want to do with it. So no insurance company wants to write abandoned buildings. The fact is, an abandoned building is a building that isn't being used. There's no electricity to it. There's no this, that, or that, or the other. There's no activity happening. There's no maintenance. There's no observation. Those are the. But the fact is that many of our churches approximate abandoned buildings 6.5 days a week. Now, some of us are very blessed to be in churches where there's activity going all week long, right? And I have been really blessed to have those kinds of churches. Even in those kind of churches, it was interesting. I have a deacon. I'd give him a shout out if I thought he was watching. But I have a deacon at one of my churches, and he lived real close to the church, and he wanted to test and see because he thought people sometimes would forget to lock the doors at that church. And so every day when he went to work and home from work, he would stop at the church and check all the doors. He just wanted to do an experiment. He was a detail oriented kind of guy. And so he did that, and he did it over a period of 2 months, and he found that 40% of the time, the church was standing unlocked.
Mm,
Wow, 40%.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. So,
And
so
so,
activity in church, folks in the church during the week is really important.
and, I always hear the complaint, oh, too many people have keys to the church. And I always thought, yeah, but Jesus kind of gave us the keys to the church and told us to use it.
Right.
And so I don't begrudge people have the keys, but I'd like them to be at least responsible enough to lock it up again when they're done. The church building is God's house, and we're supposed to be using it for God's purposes. And so I don't really begrudge people keep keys to the church. I just begrudge that they don't take care of the church. The fellow that I talked to you about earlier, when we walked through, he had a gorgeous house. I mean, a gorgeous house. And he's the kind of person with his money, he would always hire a professional. He would never do it himself, even though he was quite a handy fellow. And he and I painted most of our church, even though he would never have painted his own house. Anyway, I said to him, this doesn't look representative of God's house. Would you let your house look like this? And he said, oh, Pastor, I never let my house look like this. I said, this is God's house. We can't let God's house look like this either.
Mhm.
Frayed rugs, talk about doors that don't have the proper uh, swing back on them, that sort of thing. All those cause injuries
Yeah.
with time.
It's like, come on, people. I can lock my home door from my phone. I can lock
Right.
my office door at my church from
Right.
my phone. Open it, lock it. Those are things that is very easy nowadays to be able to take care of, at least the security
And
in
I'll
our
tell you
churches.
another. There are a lot of these kind of systems out there. I'll tell you the one I use, and I think last time we were on, it interrupted us with some loud signal because it sits right here on my desk. But I use the Cove system,
Okay.
and the Cove system has these little water detectors that you put on the floor of the bathroom. Have you seen those?
No.
It's just that big. It's just
Uh-huh.
it's just 2 inches square, and it has electrical connections on the bottom. And so you put them down on the floor of the bathroom, and if a pipe bursts and water makes
Mm.
those two little electric connections go off, then Cove calls me and says you got a water alert in bathroom two,
Wow.
and they cost, get this, $7 each.
Come on now.
And
Yeah.
the whole monitoring system, and I'm not making a commercial for Cove. I don't. There are lots of systems to do exactly the same thing. So I just happen to have
Mm.
Cove. $26 a month gets me a telephone call every time one of my monoxide, smoke, water alarms goes off. And is that too much for a church? Is that too much for God's house to protect? Um, Stephen
Yeah.
has a question.
Before Stephen gets his question, let me just ask this question. I need to get this question in
Okay.
here, the one that I wanted to go to when we came back from the break, because it is a hot topic.
Yeah.
And I've gotten many questions at the conference around this, and this has to do with firearms. So recently in the news, I think most of us were aware of the shooting that happened in California at the elementary school. There was a school, and it wasn't Adventist but it was a Christian school in Tennessee, and there was a shooting
Tennessee.
there. And so what we're hearing now, what I get probably at least once a month, if not more often, are what is the position of Adventist risk management? Where is the liability for armed security in churches, armed security at schools? If people now, I've already mentioned I'm in Huntsville, Alabama, so I'm in the South, and this is the South is the wild, wild west. I guess everybody walks and carries and is packing all the time at church and in the schools. What exactly is where is the risk? What is the position? How should
Yeah.
churches handle specifically, not just security, but armed security in churches and in schools?
Because one of my family members told me I needed to make sure that I had Deacon Smith and Wesson with me at all times.
Yeah, so I pastored in Texas, and it's the Wild West, and I know that I had a lot of armed church members. We have a specific policy that we sell for people who want to have armed security. this is exactly the same subject we had before about arborists. And here's the problem. Have you watched the videos of these officers of the law that pull somebody over and things go downhill and there's a shootout and you see them unload their weapon and hit absolutely nothing? This happens all the time. And these people are trained monthly, annually, regularly, and hard. They are trained. Whatever you think about police officers, we train them to use weapons. And still, I wonder about their competence to use a weapon because they never get the chance to do it in a regular routine way an emergency crisis situation. Multiply that times thousands when you have amateurs. There are people, we watch movies about them, they're called military operators that train literally hours a week on shoot, don't shoot, on how to clear a room, how to clear a building, how to respond to a shooter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the rest of us, we are amateurs. And you put a lethal weapon in the hand of an amateur, I'm telling you, I don't like our odds. When I was at my last church, I thought about it and I looked at every scenario I could possibly imagine of an active shooter coming into our church, and I could see no way that a trained or untrained person could return fire without civilian casualties at the hands of the return fire, right? I mean, it'd be great if your shooter would walk in and stand against a white wall that doesn't have the sheetrock that has people behind it and say, "I'm an active shooter, please kill me." Then your amateurs could probably do something if they could think fast enough and not freeze, which they generally do. So we do have a policy for it. We do not recommend it. If you want armed security, you should have armed security. You need to hire an off-duty police officer, somebody who's got the proper training to do that.
So does that mean that if we have Deacon Jones and Deacon Smith, uh, who are now the parking lot attendants and the security at church, and they are armed, are they covered? Like, does the church insurance cover them if they shoot somebody?
There are two categories of that scenario. Category one is that you didn't ask them, you didn't tell them, you didn't encourage them,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have anything to do with it, right? And they decide to draw a weapon, and you didn't know they had the weapon, etc. That's one scenario. Jury's going to be asked a question: was the South Central Conference uh, negligent in that situation, in permitting, helping, assisting, empowering this person to shoot somebody? The other situation is where you say, Deacon Jones, Deacon Smith, and Deacon Wesson, you guys get out there and you keep us safe. Now you just deputized them. That's what we have an insurance policy for. You just deputized them. Now it doesn't. The jury doesn't even get the question of were you negligent. It's really going to be did you get hurt, right? And so that's a much deeper liability situation. If you hire an off-duty police officer to do that, then he's got his own insurance, and it's not he's done it and he's taken care of it, and you've done the best you can do because he's the best you can do. Were you negligent then? Well, you were negligent if you knew he was an idiot, but if you knew that he was a competent police officer, and that's why you hired him, maybe you're not negligent, right? Maybe I don't know what a jury will do.
Good, good. All right. I know we are pressed for time. We got 2 minutes on the clock. It's really too late to try to ask this question. I'm going to throw it in anyway, just because of the time and the day in which we live. It's 2025. It's a brand new world on the political scene, on the the at least how people feel about things like civil liberties, etc. New government administration at the White House in Washington, D.C., has issued a flurry of new executive orders recently. Some of them may affect, or at least people think that some of them may affect local churches and conferences, some of them in areas of immigration, some of them in areas of civil liberties, some of them in areas of religious liberties, some of them, as we spoke beforehand, may people are at least afraid that they may infringe on our First Amendment rights, particularly as they pertain to some very unique Adventist theological positions in regard to prophecy. Revelation 13, how people may look at Adventists as being anti-American in some of these types of things. And when the nationalist fervor of the day is at a level that has rarely been seen in our lifetimes, at least in my lifetime. I'm not going to include Stephanie in that. Um, Said she called me a
Longer
young
than you.
whippersnapper. You said it. You put it out there. Anyway, are there risks to the organization when it comes to some of these things that we are seeing on the political landscape now? Should a pastor be afraid or hesitant to preach out of Revelation 13? Or should we be afraid? How do we address issues like immigration? Are there liability issues if we speak up in areas where we feel like civil liberties, religious liberties are being infringed?
So these are issues that are addressed primarily by the Office of the General Counsel of the General Conference. Um, a fellow named Todd McFarland is really big on litigating these kinds of issues. Litigating religious liberty is what they do. They even have a department called Public Affairs and Religious Liberty. And so we're very serious as a global church about that. And you know the church has been involved in a lot of these situations with voting things on Sabbath and school testing on Sabbath and that sort of thing. Some we win, some we lose, but that's where we are. There are very few areas of this that you just described that are going to touch any insurable interest or policy that we have. They are issues that we need to think about. The North American Division came out with a statement. I don't know if you read it on the immigration issue just 5 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and it was good of them to come out with that. Uh, if there are more statements along those lines that are needed, I think we need to ask Todd and the North American Division to do that. This doesn't affect other divisions. The North American Division is where it's at, right? Because that's the United States and Canada. And so, and the 51st state, I should call it, I don't know. But these are issues that are serious, and they are issues that are arguably quite prophetic. If you have any questions at all, Bob Burrows sits at the North American Division, and you should give him a call and ask him these questions
Okay.
because it's a developing scenario, and as you said, it's unprecedented.
Let me throw
But,
this one out there as well, Steph. It-
mhm.
like there's a church that's saying it's not enough for us to sit here and stare into our Bibles. And no matter what side of the political spectrum you land on, there are churches that may get to the point where they say we need to do something, so we're going to organize a protest. And it's not we're going to go to one, we're going to organize one, we're going to call for one. Risk liabilities there as well. I don't know,
And we
Steph.
actually do it. See, my
Yes.
thing is calling like, and we're so now we're on the street, walking down the street with signs and so forth. Is there? That was my question too. I was actually going to say that. Like, what's the
Mm.
liability there?
So church activities are covered, but you're never going to be covered for getting arrested, for instance. Okay,
Hmm.
but they're covered if you trip and fall, if there's a negligence case. But if it's war or riot, that's excluded completely. Okay, so it would only be if there was an accident, as if you were having a church health fair out in the park. It would be exactly the same coverage Now, we have to ask ourselves another question, and that is a pastor who does that protest acting within the course and scope of his employment or her employment? Is that a really an appropriate church sponsored event? And it's a hard question. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is. Um,
Who is
you know,
asked to answer that question, by the way?
I
Who-
think if you read Bonhoeffer,
Mhm.
he came up with a different answer than you or I might have, but in his mind and in his writings, it was well reasoned, right? And so I don't know. You could talk
Yeah,
to Bob about it.
well, I'm saying in our context, like in a legal context, is a court going to try to answer that question? Or are they going to ask a denomination to answer that question? Who would be expected to give the answer to that question?
Ultimately, that question. Let's say that something bad happened at the scene, and somebody wants to sue the pastor for organizing this thing. The question will be the same question we always get: Was the pastor, was the church, was the conference negligent in doing this? And then they'll define negligence as the failure to use ordinary care. That is the care that a normal person in the same similar circumstances would use. And the jury gets to answer yes or no. And if they say that you were negligent in the way you did that or what you did, then they'll get the second question. Was somebody damaged or injured as a result of that? And then the third question: what sum of money, if paid now in cash, would fairly and reasonably compensate the injured party for the injuries they sustained as a result of the negligence of the company?
Right, but no, keep it. That's not the question that those aren't the questions that I'm referring to. I'm saying the question of, is this a spiritual? And I forgot how you worded it, but is this a
It was in the
spiritual?
line of your duties. Was it
Yeah.
in the line of your duties as a
Course
pastor?
and scope, yeah. Course and scope of a pastor's duty. That's you ought to ask your conference that.
You need to
We
ask
just
HR that.
HR.
Yes. So
Yes.
and to answer, I think it was Stephen that asked a question earlier. This plays to that. We had a class action lawsuit about a Ponzi scheme, and the real question for us was that in the there you go, Stephen. Was that in the course and scope of a pastor's activity? And it seems to me it's on conferences to
Mm.
instruct pastors and say raising funds for an investment scheme is not in your course and scope of your duties, and if you do it, we'll terminate you. No. Yes. Thank you, Cindy. Exactly. Riot and civil commotion are excluded. But the question is, on this greater scheme of class action lawsuits, any of these kind of things, what were they in the course and scope of their employment? Because if you weren't in the course and scope of employment, we got no coverage for you. We're not doing anything with that. That was you stepping out and doing something else. And pastors are famous for stepping out and doing other things, right? And so not our issue if you step outside the course and scope. We in the law there's a word for it. It's called frolic. If a truck driver is driving a truck and he stops to get fuel, he's on the job. That's part of his duty. Workers' comp applies, everything applies. But if he stops off the way and says, I'm going to go visit the national park since I'm driving right by it, and he's on a frolic at that point. And there now workers' comp doesn't cover him. The employer's liability insurance doesn't cover him. He's on his own out there because he's on a frolic. And so your conference needs to help you define what is your course and scope of your duties. And it is never to shill for an investment. Let me tell you that up front. And number two, it's not to teach people about cyber trading or
Mhm.
cryptocurrency or any of those kind of things. Our ministry is the gospel. Now, the right arm of the gospel is the health message, but I think it doesn't go very far beyond that.
Yeah, and I know that there's going to be arguments that can go well far into that when we talk about stewardship. Is stewardship a responsibility, and is economic development Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in
Yeah,
health. Those are
right.
all things that can be, I think, sticky and debatable, et cetera, et cetera. So you're saying it's your
But
local
that's when your
conference.
conference, but that's when
Yeah.
you should contact your conference to get guidance, because one of the things that Elder Weingartner did not mention is annually, the Adventist Risk Management Organization has conferences where I want to say 59 conferences, Guam, some other folks come together, and we
Okay.
literally go through, and they have tons of resources and workshops. And so we at the conference level get the information, and it's our responsibility to share that information uh, to our organization so that
We get really
um,
good
risks are
presentations.
mitigated.
We get really good presenters because I'm not the smartest guy at Adventist Risk Management. I'm just the guy you invited. And so I don't know all the answers, but we have people who do know more answers than me.
Hey,
You're the
look, look.
smartest guy there. You're the smartest guy there. But remember, I'm the fangirl, so
Yeah, I know. I'm your fan too.
Everybody, we want to thank Elder James Winegardner, the President, CEO, Adventist Risk Management, Inc., for taking the time to hang out with us here at the Pastors Roundtable on this 14th day of March 2025. I want to thank especially my co-host tonight, the lovely Steph. Thank you so much, Steph, for hanging out with me tonight and sitting
it's
in
been
for
fun.
Dion and for Roger. I appreciate both. Appreciate both of you hanging out with me tonight. We thank our audience tonight for sticking through this tonight, and we thank you for your
And
questions. And
hold on,
yes,
let
good.
me give a special shout out. I know I
Yes,
keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry. I
go
don't do
do
this
it. Do
often.
it.
I want to give a special shout out to Cordell Pierman. I know she's watching, and
Yes.
she helped us coordinate, so I got to shout her name out. Thanks, Cordell.
Cardell, I saw your name on a whole bunch of emails, so I know you were in there. Thank you so much. Again, to our audience tonight, we thank you so much. When you finish watching our broadcast tonight, make sure that you share it with somebody. If you have benefited or enjoyed what you've heard, put a little thumbs up in there. That helps helps other people be able to see the broadcast, to show up in their streams as far as the algorithms go. So make sure you interact with the stream tonight if you want somebody else to be able to take advantage of that. On behalf of Dion, Roger, Steph, TJ, and myself, we want to thank you all for helping us. Are we going to do this, Steph? We're going to do it?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
for helping us to help you keep ministry relevant
Resourced
and real.
and real.
Good night, everybody. Have a good night. And I've got to search for the outro. There it is. I didn't have it queued. Good night, everybody.